So we're the process group.
All right, let's start the presentation of the process group, please.
Yeah, so with the process group, we broke it down to the opportunities and actions. We started off with the technical. Basically, our focus was to streamline and simplify the whole process of the whole urine recovery and processing it. Basically, the technical aspect was the opportunity was countries like Sweden. They have a design, like a standardized design that they have access to. In Australia, we currently don't have access to any other standardized design. So maybe development in terms of those kind of designs may be an area for opportunities. In terms of economic aspects, incentivizing programs like for example, the solar panel programs and things like that. If we can draw some resources from the government and divert towards our process, then it will be beneficial. And also maybe using existing infrastructures, retrofitting existing toilets and things like that. And and also exposure to more wider organizations and communities where we can implement these toilets that we design from technical and our economical retrofitting into these communities and organizations. And then, aside separating that process, we're looking into the safety and safety aspects of the. So basically, we process the urine, and then because it's going to end up in front of our tables, we got to make sure it's safe for human consumptions and things like that. And also, we got to make sure when we expose these things to the environment, it won't cause any harm in the long run. Because further down the line, it's going to be hard to fix when it becomes out of control. And in terms of social aspects, because and also
the opportunity to produce some eco-friendly fertilizers.
Yeah. And in terms of social aspects, there's no foundational government laws right now. So maybe if you can, linking this aspect to the action at the end of the if you can link as we have the foundational government laws, if we can have it start off a bit beneficial to us in terms of advantageous towards us. In terms of long run, we won't have to constantly divert and try to change things over time. If we can make it beneficial from the start, and how we're going to put into action is through working with governments and organizations to develop plumbing codes and in terms of economic aspect, centralize the processing scale and develop plumbing designs which focuses on cost reductions. For example, I think Sean mentioned having no bends in plumbing where Struvite can generate, and making these systems operate for a long time, so we don't have to constantly operate, constantly maintain it, to have maintenance and operation costs. And in terms of social aspect, if we can initiate a good perception into educational systems, if we start off with a good perception in society, then we won't have to divert the perception later in the future. And maybe we can do that through media and public education, and maybe down the line through these kind of programs we'll be able to develop even tertiary education systems where we might even have secular professions like secular engineers and things like that. And we can implement these kind of things into even TAFE courses like for planning, like certifications and all that kind of things. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to do this one if somebody else can do that, I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You stop camera before?
No, I paused it just at the end. I played it again.
Okay.
Yeah, so it should be playing.
Okay.
You want to do the drivers, if I do the value propositions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we organize ours very differently, and we sort of did it almost stream of consciousness, so it evolved as we went. So I will say that these two things kind of collapse into others. Urine fertilizer with micro and macronutrients is the product, but then the value propositions are that utilities could claim ACUs for carbon reduction based on the lower carbon footprint of urine diversion, if in fact it is a lower carbon footprint, and that farmers could have a value proposition of perhaps some farmers want a natural product for fertilizer. They don't want to use synthetic fertilizers, but they want a quick release fertilizer, so the urine would be that, or the urine-derived fertilizer would be that natural fertilizer. They also might be able to charge a premium for making a locally produced product using locally produced fertilizers, and that there are North Queensland. All right. North Queensland. There are farmers in North Queensland who can't apply fertilizer because of reef issues, and so maybe they could apply a biogenic urine fertilizer and then pollute and still destroy the reef. But perhaps
That's a loophole.
it's going to be a loophole for them, which is not great. But maybe if it were combined with biochar, it would become a slow release fertilizer, so then they could still apply nitrogen, but it would be in a way that was safe for the reef. And so they would get to use fertilizer, but the reef would still be okay. In actually not aquaculture, but hydroponics, the urine is a very soluble liquid fertilizer, so it would be beneficial to them, especially if they're trying to use a natural fertilizer. And you want to cover the drivers there next in the stream of consciousness.
And do you want to have a backward or a short going? Yeah. All right. So now we've got you interested in some wonderful products made from your own fertilizer. Now we can talk about some of the drivers. So, Sean, you want to buy some of your own fertilizer or anyone else? So we all know how the real world works, right? And some of the drivers are not necessarily something that's all goodwill. There's going to be something more realistic. So political. So maybe it might help win elections, for a reason why there might be some drivers to get some products on the market. Obviously, climate change is very important, but we all know that sort of really comes down to politics as to what brings these things forward. Another interesting one that was brought up was the Olympics in 2032. So, a colleague here from Logan Water was looking at what they can do to help maybe catalyze some of these nutrient circular economy projects as part of the Olympics coming up. Particularly, it's gonna come in a big way in your area. So that could be a good driver. So that's, I guess, a part of the Olympics. You've got infrastructure upgrades. There's buildings for urine diversion, and there's also a means for this to actually help to change legislation. So a lot of these things, there's all these barriers in place, and one of those is just legislation. And so, one of these, you need something like an Olympics to just smash through all of that and just get things done. So that we saw that as actually a pretty good driver. All right, do you want to pick it up from here? I can keep going if you like. Big services.
Yeah, I could do that, and then if someone else, do you want to do actions, or do you? I know you're wanting to not.
Yeah.
You want to do actions? Okay. You want to pick up actions after?
Yeah, I can do the actions.
Great, terrific. So then to continue with back to the value propositions, one related one to what we just talked about gets into scope 2 and 3 emissions. Those potentially be reduced by using this fertilizer for farmers or supermarkets who have an imperative to reduce those, which I don't understand, but I understand that it exists. So that's amazing. People are actually talking about that here. And then getting into decentralized wastewater, so systems that have, houses that have on-site systems that would maybe be obligated to connect to a sewer if a sewer came through, but maybe the sewer is not practical for expense or logistics, It could be that, that urine diversion, or actually diverting urine and feces, so all toilet water, could be a way to safely and effectively manage the toilet water on site that would satisfy regulators. So the value proposition would be that homeowners or developers could continue to use on-site systems rather than connecting to sewers, but satisfy the regulatory requirement to protect health and human and environmental health. That's kind of a mashup of several of these. We also had utilities saving on energy, so that's a cost savings to utilities that they would have to be using less energy. And surge and flows, I'm not actually sure what that, anyone know what that one, why don't you answer that one and then go on
Yeah, I
to
thought
the
that's
actions.
just in relation to urine diversion, it might help to deal with surging flows. So I've seen a few things, just paid attention to, and noticed a few things in the media about water treatments and treatment plants dealing with populations that grow and then decline, and so maybe urine diversion might be a means to offer a better service in that regard. So that's where that comes from.
And then we're on to the action.
Oh, we got to actions? Oh, wow, okay, yep. So where we got to with all this, we distilled it down to some actions. And so one thing that seemed to be really quite clear in this is to conduct a life cycle assessment for urine-based fertilizers. So, with all these options, things that we've talked about before, there really needs to be some quantifiable benefits to be able to provide the value proposition for all these industries to take on board, and then use that to provide to understand what the value is. The other one is to establish a regulatory framework for decentralized system of source separation. So so really to look at how the regulation can be part of that, facilitating understanding the value. And also you got the value of fertilizer, urine and biochar. Sorry, we sort of had to scribble these down in a bit of a hurry at the end, so hopefully got those. But also I think one we didn't have was the business cases, and being able to say quite clear business cases where the economics and other factors, metrics to be able to determine the value for whichever community, whichever entity that we're trying to assess is also important. So that's, any last words? No, that's us. Thank you.
All right.
Who's next?
So we're just gonna,
Let's take the
you're
mic.
gonna have to look it up here.
All right, let's go.
The magic. So you had a stream of consciousness. This is absolutely a stream of consciousness. You don't need to try and read it.
Like
Oh, it's a full mind map. It's a mind map, it's a systems diagram. It's the solution to all of our problems. So we'll just, we had researchers, local government and utilities on the table, and we'll just give a few quick examples. So we're the actors people, the people side of it. And one of the things we were talking about is that you need, that the opportunities or the actions is, we really need to find the change makers, the champions of change within these organisations. Because we said the two representatives that we had here today from council and from utilities, I mean, they're here because they're very passionate about this topic. They don't need to take time out of their busy schedules to do this, but and you too, exactly. You're here, so we need to obviously be working with the change makers. And so this sort of started, or to step back, with the barrier, which I don't think was even in this document, of it's too hard basket, because Neil was saying, if his team wasn't committed to trialling all these things, you just put it in a too hard basket. The technology breaks down, you've got to find out why, you're trialling all these new things. It's too hard, it's taking too much time, too much money, too much effort, too many unknowns. So either you need to create what we talked about yesterday, a frictionless experience for the users in the value chain, so that they want to do it, so that it's more desirable than our linear value chain and actions. Or you have to have an embedded culture of commitment to sustainability, which is what a lot of the utilities and government groups in this room have. So that's where the whole changemaker thing came into it as well. Another barrier we workshopped was around the fragmentation of benefits, that often the benefits are really dispersed amongst different actors and stakeholders. Some of the benefits are within a water utility, some of the benefits are within fertiliser companies, some of it are within manufacturers of toilets or other groups, other entrepreneurs, and it's only when Saeed and GAM do a whole of system economic analysis that you see the full benefits together. So you're providing that evidence base, and you can use that evidence base to bring value chain stakeholders together to develop concrete action plans about who's going to do what, making sure they're involved in that process so they have ownership and trust. But then Neil also told us about his experience in the City of Sydney, and I hope this isn't all the stuff you want to share tomorrow in your presentation, but he's basically got a niche ecosystem because all of those benefits in that value chain is all within the City of Sydney. They have the parks that need the fertilisers. They have the houses and commercial sectors that need the waste collection and the waste processing and treatment. So he and his team have the whole value chain right there. So they're a niche ecosystem. And not only can that function, even though it doesn't have the same economy of scale, it can demonstrate what's possible. And we talked a lot about the need for living labs and more demonstrations, whether that's Western Sydney parklands or perhaps what's going to happen in Aerotropolis, who knows. So there's lots of different things there, and I'll just mention maybe one more thing, greenwashing. Some of you may think greenwashing is a negative thing. We actually saw this as an opportunity. If you have one of the largest fertiliser companies in the country who was risk averse and not interested in more sustainable fertilisers, changing and developing it. It's like, when the big oil companies suddenly started to produce solar and wind. Yes, it might have been a bit of greenwashing, but I'll take it, you know what I mean? We're starting from a low base, but that might stimulate the market because they've got the economy of scale and they can prove and demonstrate those kind of products to the end users. And so we're getting back to that demonstration thing again. So, I mean, we could go on forever, but we won't because we know dinner is nearly here. But yeah, do you think there's anything critical that I need to add to those few examples? But yeah, really good
Suggestion
discussion.
that there should be champagne.
Yes, that's right. Next time we want beer and champagne and chips on the table.
All right.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Neil can sponsor that.
Someone, are you recording?
No anymore.
Okay, we'll try and get through this very, very quickly. So we had a bit of a mind map going on, and then I wasn't doing my job as a facilitator and keeping track of time. So then we came to this a little late in the piece, but I thought the most effective thing would be to get the actions down, because I think sometimes the opportunities then flow from the actions. So we thought that it was really important to bring the regulators on board. So those larger, in New South Wales, the EPA, departments responsible for building standards, public health units. You get them on board because then they can drive, passing legislation that then, creates that upcycling process, that top-down governance. In regards to, and also building that evidence base within separate departments as well. For example, with departments of health, really looking into research around the impacts of antimicrobial resistant diseases within the circular nutrient ecosystem or economy. So funding research to leverage learning from prior case studies. So we've got examples from Denmark, Sweden, China, Kerry was saying as well, Europe obviously. So extracting that knowledge that exists out there, like Melita said this morning, sometimes there's benefit to being a little bit late to the party because you can learn from what's out there and you can avoid the mistakes. So pumping some funding into that. Requirements for new buildings. So one of the big issues we're seeing is around retrofitting. It's actually super expensive. So we think you need standards for all new buildings. And then from that, you can start to get a bit of data developing around the economic incentives for doing that. So then you can take that to retrofitting the new buildings. So you can develop that kind of evidence base by setting standards early with new buildings. Pitch to CSOs. For building industrial park management companies. This was like around Lend-Lease. Yeah, so talking with some of these, massive building companies like Lend-Lease, Westfields, what's their appetite around circular nutrient economies, scaling this kind of urine diverting technology in some of their buildings. And then that obviously has a trickle down effect in ways that we don't even know. Getting customer engagement from utilities companies, behavioural researchers. So you know, Sydney Water, they have like whole teams that are out there responsible for engaging with communities, and things like the impacts of cultural belief systems. You know, in a lot of Muslim cultures, they don't want to you know, engage with any kind of the impacts of wastewater on food, or if you're washing with those because of cultural beliefs. So understanding some of those taboos around this and how it could impact those specific groups, and whether there are opportunities to build off those, but being aware, I guess, of those inherent kind of issues there. So I'll rush along. And then investment in public education programs. Yeah, so, you know, ultimately, it's the broader public that are, you know, contributing their urine, and also eating the food that's going to be coming from this system. So you need to bring everyone along for the journey as well. It's not going to be, you know, just creating rules from the top down. Yeah, it's a whole ecosystem. I'll pause there and we can go eat. Great, thank you. Thank you, Aldo.
Thank you. Wonderful. I just want to thank all of you. Well, and then if you please and try to sign this as it's the ethical application, and we also have your name so we can